Welcome to freedomlovin.com, where we focus on building freedom in an unfree world. Through personal development, location independence, and passive income strategies. Now here's your host, Kevin Koskela.
Welcome to Freedom Lovin'. This is Kevin, and this is episode number 36. In just a minute, I have an interview coming up with Beth Buelow of theintrovertentrepreneur.com on the 4 habits of happy introvert entrepreneurs. So stay tuned for that. It was really interesting because as an introvert, I got a lot out of it, and I'm really excited about that stuff. So just a couple things. A Freedom Lovin' tip of today is stop comparing yourself to others. This is something I'm learning and getting better at, but it's something that is really easy to do in the world of business because there's always somebody that's going to be doing better than you in some way or another, whether it's they're making more money or they've got more cool things on their website, or they just have a better design website, or they have thousands more Twitter followers or Facebook fans or whatever it is. There's so many ways you can compare yourself, but it doesn't help. None of that helps. The best way is to just take and get inspiration from people that are successful, but to compare yourself is kind of a losing game, and it creates a feeling of frustration, and it also gets you in kind of the competitive mindset with all these other entrepreneurs or all these other business people, whereas the best way to be is to have the win-win attitude. So there's something that can be gained from anyone out there, whatever business they're in. If they're having success, you can learn from them. I've been around people that are wildly successful and that started off in a position where they knew nothing about business, and I knew them back then when I was doing fairly well and they were doing nothing, and now they're world famous and making way more money than me. And rather than be jealous or envious of that and let it hurt me, I always work on just learning from that and seeing what they're doing and kind of admiring them and seeing what the differences are. Maybe there's some things that they do that I don't necessarily want. Maybe I don't want to work. Maybe they work 100-hour weeks, and maybe that's not something I really want to do. So there's a lot of different angles, and there's a lot of different ways that people go about things and different lifestyles and all that. So anyway, that's the tip. Heading to Mexico on February 23rd. So that's coming up here in a couple weeks, and I'm really excited about that. I'm just going to go down there for, I think it's going to be about 8 days. I bought a one-way ticket to Guadalajara, which I hardly know anything about. I've been told that it is a really nice place and that I should visit it. My Spanish practice kind of went down the tubes around Christmas time, so I haven't really looked at any of my Spanish lessons since then, but I will jump back on that in the next couple weeks and hopefully be able to make heads or tails of what people are saying down there. But I will be in Guadalajara for a few days, and then I will head over to Puerto Vallarta to visit my friend Jake from The Voluntary Life and hang out with him and Hannah, his partner, for a few days, and then I will head back to San Diego. And actually, I'm probably going to have to get a flight. Since I got the one-way ticket, I got to figure out how to get back. It was really easy to get the flight down using my points from one of my credit cards, but getting back, there was just no good options. Like, everything was either, it was going to take a whole day to get back from somewhere that's like 3 hours away. That didn't make any sense, or it was just going to cost me too many points. So I'm going to probably buy a ticket to Tijuana, and I'm going to walk across the border. So I've never done that before. I've never flown from or to into Tijuana. The good thing is there is a trolley that I can get right over the border that takes me right up to basically my house or my apartment where I'm staying. So that will be easy. The hard thing is the border crossing is pretty much a nightmare at all times of the day and night. And so maybe I'll get lucky and maybe it won't be a nightmare. Maybe it'll only be an hour wait as opposed to like a 3-hour wait to get over the border. But I think it's always been kind of a mess. But when they started cracking down, like after 9/11, they started requiring passports. You had to have a passport just to go to Mexico. That made everything way worse. And the bureaucrats down there are not so friendly from my experiences. So I really hate it because as cool and calm and collective as I could be normally, when I get in front of any kind of person with like a government uniform on, a TSA agent or a border control person, I get super nervous and I forget what to say, and I feel like I'm guilty of something even if I'm not. So I kind of fall apart, so I really don't like that. But I think that may be the only way to get home. So that, other than I could just stay in Mexico if I fall in love with it, but I don't think I'm going to do that this time around. So that's that. And, I have a couple more things. I'm getting a new round of credit cards soon. I'm going to be following what they're talking about on Eric Paquette's Abroaders podcast, which I highly recommend listening to that. Just look up Abroaders podcast on iTunes, and they give just a ton of tips on travel hacking. And it's a great show because they just get right to the point, give the tips. They talk a lot about the credit card system, banking, like how to go about that, what to do. So I'm following their advice, and I am going to do a round of credit cards, probably do like 4 or 5 applications here soon, so I can start earning points again, start earning major points. So, because I've already got my bonus points for the credit cards that I have, so it's kind of pointless to just keep using those, even though I am getting points from those too, but I could get these bonuses of like 40, 50,000, which would be really awesome because that's going to allow me to keep the gravy train rolling and keep the travel going for almost free. I have a new podcast recommendation. I just started listening to James Altucher's show. It's just the James Altucher Show, and you can find that on iTunes. And he talks to a lot of entrepreneurs and people that are doing exciting things, and he really gets in there with the interviews. If anyone has listened to Mixergy, I would compare it to that, only it's way better. It's way more entertaining to me, and I don't get irritated because of that show. I just sort of, I don't know, it didn't click for me. I know a lot of people like it, but it didn't click for me. But the James Altucher podcast is awesome, and you'll probably get a lot of inspiration from that if you listen to it. So without further ado, here's my interview with Beth Buelow of the Introvert Entrepreneur. And have a great week, and go out there and build some freedom, and we'll talk to you soon. All right. Well, I'm super happy to have Beth Buelow on the show today. Beth is a certified professional coach whose specialty is training and coaching services for introverts. She's the author of 2 books, Insight, Reflections on the Gifts of Being an Introvert, as well as The Introvert Entrepreneur. And her website is theintrovertentrepreneur.com. Beth, welcome to Freedom Lovin'.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So we're going to talk about the 4 habits of happy introvert entrepreneurs, which is otherwise known as the REST formula. But I wanted to get into some stuff beforehand that we can kind of get into what exactly is introversion and how is that defined. And I know in your book, your first book, you really got into detail on that and how there's so many misperceptions out there of what an introvert is and how it's confused with shyness and things like that. So can you talk about what the definition of introversion is?
Sure. And I always appreciate this question because I've learned not to make any assumptions about people's understanding of it. It's been a term that's been around since the 1920s, and it originated with Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, and he's the one who identified these introvert and extrovert tendencies. And so introversion is about where you gain and drain your energy. Introverts gain energy through solitude and quieter environments, lower stimulation environments. That's how we recharge our batteries. And we tend to drain energy. We expend a lot of energy when we're in social situations. So we can absolutely do the social situations. We can go to the party, go to the networking, extend ourselves. It's simply that it takes a lot of energy to do that. And part of what we'll be talking about with the REST formula is that there's going to be sort of a common refrain about rest, about recharging and solitude. And I don't necessarily like to talk about extroverts as the opposite of introverts or vice versa, because we're all on a spectrum and we all have shades of each within us. It's just which way we learn. But extroverts, if somebody's pretty solidly in that extrovert column, they will gain energy through social interaction. It's like that's something that they kind of crave, and that's how they recharge their batteries, is through talking with people and being in groups and interacting and getting more stimulation in their environment. And it's not that they don't need solitude. They absolutely do need quiet time and alone time, but they don't need as much of it. And if they have too much of it, then it's kind of counterproductive. They start to get drained and they're like, okay, who can I talk to? So, both types need it's a yin yang. We need a balance. It's just which one do you default to? Which one do you prefer when it comes to, I need to be re-energized? Would you rather, spend some time alone, or would you rather hook up with a group of friends?
Yeah, and you would say that probably ideally most people would have some sort of balance, but at the same time we typically lean one way or the other.
Yes. Yeah. And I always think of it as core and cultivated. So, I take myself as an example because it's the person I know best. I'm core introvert.
Yeah.
That's who I am at my heart and soul. And as an entrepreneur, as a person who likes people, I've cultivated my extrovert energy so that I can project myself out to accomplish the goals that I want to in the world. So I do think that, the key is developing a healthy opposite energy, if you will, that my extroversion is healthy. It's not faked or contrived or driven by guilt or obligation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the reasons that I really wanted to bring you on the show is that I started following you on Facebook because I am an introvert entrepreneur. So I thought that was a fascinating thing that somebody was putting those two things together, because nobody ever talks about this when it comes to all the business advice out there and everything. It seems like it's a really unique kind of angle on all of this. And also, I think there are a lot of introverts out there that probably don't really think of themselves as being able to get into business, or maybe they're in business and it's just a struggle because it's sort of an extrovert world where everything that's valued is getting yourself out there and pushing yourself and really highlighting yourself and having your picture everywhere and your videos all over the place. And so it's kind of tough because you sort of look at that and go, I couldn't do that. And as an introvert, it's a real challenge to kind of wade through all that. So I think you're providing a really awesome resource for people. Now,
thanks.
Yeah. And now, what was your path to kind of becoming the introvert entrepreneur coach?
It's long and winding. You would, if you went back 20 years, you would never guess that this is where I would end up, which is, I think, part of the fun. And I think it's probably a common introvert entrepreneur story, because my training is in music, my formal schooling and arts administration. So I spent about 12 years as a nonprofit professional doing everything from marketing to fundraising to grant making and writing and editing and, all things in between. And I do those things every day now. And so, that nonprofit training ground was perfect for entrepreneurship, because there are so many parallels between raising money and attracting clients, building your business. So what happened was, I was on this nonprofit track, and about 6 years ago, a little over 6 years ago, we had an opportunity to move from the Midwest out to the Pacific Northwest. And we decided, my husband and I, let's go for an adventure here and see what happens. And he was the one that was employed, and I was going to be looking for a job. And it was November of 2007. So it was just before things really started to unravel economically. And so I was having a bit of, challenge finding a job, especially in the city that I live, which is Tacoma, because it seemed like everything was up north in Seattle. And that's, especially I think for an introvert, spending that much time in the car and, transportation is very draining. So what happened was, once I figured out that I was going to need to kind of take a different path, I ended up having a very serendipitous meeting with a group of professional coaches. And you know how sometimes when you're around a group of people that perhaps you haven't met before, or that are in a different profession from you, but somehow you feel like you've known them a long time. And, I felt like I had found my peeps. I found my tribe among these coaches. And it brought together, I started to realize, like, oh, wow, you can actually make money. You can build a business. You can contribute by being a coach. And as it turns out, I went back to my browser history, and, maybe like 4 years prior, I had been doing internet searches about coaching. And I'd had a long-standing interest in personality types and psychology and human behavior and all of that. So I thought, okay, so I think I'm going to go down this coaching route. And I entered coach training and thought I was going to specialize in coaching nonprofit leaders, but found that my heart was just not in it. I knew intellectually what I needed to do to make it happen, but emotionally, somehow I was not on board. So I decided to let go forcing who my niche was, who my ideal client was, and just started to see who showed up. And what I started noticing over a period of time is who was showing up was introverts. And when I first noticed that, I noticed it and I said, well, that's really interesting. And then I let it go because I didn't really understand or realize at the moment that, oh, that's actually a group of people that would be really fun to work with, like that's a viable niche. And it was about 6 months later when I was at a business development workshop when the facilitator was talking about target markets and niches, when I all of a sudden literally had that light bulb moment of, oh my gosh, I coach introverts.
Yeah.
That's what I do. And it was a really exciting moment. And it was fortunate because I had a few people in the room that I knew that were there to kind of witness that and support me in it. And what surprised me about it is that I didn't second guess it. I think right there in that workshop, I put the stake in the ground. And usually I will research something to death, overthink it to death, have to make sure, oh, this has to be the right thing. And this time I just said, no, this is it. And oddly, introvert entrepreneur just kept popping into my head over and over and over again. And I decided to run with it. So that's sort of the the medium length story.
No, yeah, that's
of how that all came to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the whole combining things like that. Like you have an interest in two different areas and you just combine them, and then there's this huge niche out there that you didn't even realize, it was like right under your nose and you didn't even realize it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And I also like the kind of just jumping right into it, because so many times we tend to just overanalyze and paralysis analysis and all that, and then things never happen. But when you just jump in, I did the same thing with the first website I created, which was swimming. My swimming is my background, and I started coaching, and I basically had people that were coming to me were triathletes. And then I was like, swimming for triathletes. Maybe there's something out there. And then, same exact thing. I was like, I don't even want to research it. I'm just going to do it because I know there's a need for it.
Exactly. It's like you feel a resonance, like it goes ping inside of you. And you're just like, okay, I'm running with it.
Yeah. So a couple of quotes I pulled out from your book, your first book, The Insight Reflections on the Gifts of Being an Introvert, that I liked and just wanted to kind of get your comment on it, or maybe expanding on it a little bit. The first one is, I'm not antisocial, I am pro-solitude.
Right. Yeah, that's it's a great way to kind of sum up, to be contrary to that stereotype of antisocial. And what's interesting is antisocial actually is, it's a real term. I mean, I think we kind of use it we kind of throw it away like, oh, she's antisocial. Yeah. But it actually means somebody is, actively disrupting the social order, going against it. And so, to really start to say, just like shyness and introvert aren't the same thing, neither are antisocial and introvert. And so it's not about disrupting or being against social situations. It's more, I love being alone. I love my solitude. And I've also heard somebody use the phrase semi-social, which I also like. Because it kind of it acknowledges, yes, I'm social some of the time, but not always, and that's okay.
Right.
Yeah,
that's great. And then, so the second one actually is, okay, I'll read the quote. It's, honoring your introversion can help you overcome your shyness. And I wanted to get your take on the idea of introversion and shyness being two different things as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, shyness is, first I want to say, just like we talk about there's nothing wrong with being an introvert, there's nothing wrong with being shy.
Yeah.
And I think because, and I've actually been called out on this. It was great by somebody who specializes in working with shy people. And she says, it's like the more we start saying introvert does not equal shy, it's kind of setting up shy as something undesirable and not good.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, no, that's not necessarily what it is. I mean, I totally get it. And I agree that we have to be careful about how we say it. But shyness is more about social anxiety. Mm-hmm. And so if I don't approach someone at an event or at a party, or I hold back, it's more likely out of some fear or doubt or, anxiety. And if I'm an introvert, if I'm holding back, it's more likely to be about pacing my energy and trying to decide, is it worth it to extend myself? Or I need to extend myself over here, so I'm not going to do it over here. And because both shy people and introverts can, tend to look reserved and like they're holding back and perhaps not talking as much, it can look the same on the outside.
Right.
And I think that's why those two things get collapsed. So I think the thing about, using your introversion to overcome shyness, if you happen to be both, it's about recognizing the difference between the two and challenging and stretching yourself a little bit in those times when it's your introversion at work versus the shyness, because you're going to end up having two different solutions depending on which dynamic is happening within you. So if you're feeling introverted and you're holding back, it might be about your energy. And perhaps, you need to step away and recharge a little bit, and then you can come back to the situation. Or you haven't stored up the energy in advance, and so that's why you're having some trouble extending yourself.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's the shyness, you're going to have to stretch yourself in a different way. It's going to be more about overcoming the nervousness.
Yeah,
or the fear.
And I like that you said there's no overcoming introversion. That's just part of your personality trait, and you just work with it. And with shyness, you can overcome it. So that's yes, exactly. It's shyness is something that you can develop some new skills around and really stretch yourself. Whereas the introversion, I think, it's not necessarily overcoming it; it's accepting it, and then learning how to work with it and honor it. Yeah. Cool. So I want to get right into the 4 habits of happy introvert entrepreneurs. And first of all, I think there's a perception out there that, like I talked about at the beginning, that entrepreneurs need to be extroverts. That there's no room for introverts in the whole world of starting a business and being a president of a company or even being a solo entrepreneur. What do you think about that?
I think it's hogwash. No. I think that it's understandable that there's a perception that the extroverts are going to be the ones that are going to be most successful, because I think we often equate being a business owner or entrepreneurship with being in sales, which of course we are. But I think we also then extend that to saying then you have to be like a salesperson. And then people say, well, what's the stereotypical successful salesperson? It's an extrovert.
Yeah, it's a car salesman, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think people very quickly make those leaps and don't even really realize the dots that they're connecting to get to that place of making an assumption that the extrovert is going to be the entrepreneur. What I find is that introverts tend to be, at least the introverts that I've encountered, tend to be service-based entrepreneurs. So they're providing services of some kind, whether it's engineering, consultation, coaching, therapy, massage therapy, any range of services that we can provide.
Right.
We tend not necessarily to be drawn to product-based. Of course, there are lots of exceptions to that. I think of even Tony Hsieh. He's an introvert entrepreneur. He founded, or he was one of the, very first investors and founding members of Zappos, which is all about products, right? And yet they're not really about products. They're about happiness.
That's right.
So even a product-based business, he made it about service.
Yeah.
So I think that even if an introvert is in that product-based place, they make it more about what's the experience that they want to offer people. So I think that there's lots of room for introverts in entrepreneurship. And the key is discovering how you can make it your own. First understand that the conventional wisdom doesn't always apply.
Yeah.
And that your answers might be counterintuitive and kind of go against the grain, but to have some courage in that.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that. There's a guy named Chris Guillebeau. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yes.
Okay. So he has a book called The Art of Nonconformity, and he runs the World Domination Summit every year up in Portland. And his thing is he's an introvert, and he makes it kind of part of his thing. And he has this conference where like hundreds of people show up, and everybody's talking about this whole idea. Like people are like, I need some downtime. I'm going to go rest. And it's like it's totally up front, and nobody's being judgmental of people that are just acknowledging that they are an introvert, and they're not they don't want to go and network for 5 hours. It's just it's like time to go. So I think that whole thing is interesting.
Did you go to the World Domination Summit?
I went to Portland this year. I didn't get tickets for it, but I'd never been to Portland, so I just wanted to go see the city, and I just went to some of the parties and some of the events, but I didn't actually go to any of the talks.
Okay. Because I was registered and I'm going this coming year.
Oh, okay.
And it was pretty amazing because I was a little nervous about, okay, 3,000 people in, a 5-block radius for 2.5 days or whatever. Is it going to be overwhelming? And it wasn't. It was surprisingly, I wouldn't say low key, but moderate key.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that has to do perhaps with Chris's energy and had a spaciousness around the way the whole thing was set up. So, he's another perfect example of an introvert entrepreneur who has really created, some really fabulous resources and information and has really helped people to see, hey, you don't have to follow the status quo.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of introverts feel that way, and we're probably the ones banging the drum the loudest about that.
That's true. Yeah, most likely. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Let's get into get sidetracked here. But let's get into the rest formula. So the first habit that you have is restorative time. And you said downtime, solitude, reduced stimulation, and recharging.
Yes. And so restorative time, I think, is number one, numero uno, top of the list for everyone that is aware of their introversion. What you really need is that time that is alone, quiet. I would say, one thing I discovered a few years ago was like me being alone in my office and bopping around on the internet is not restorative time. I might be by myself, but I'm still getting all sorts of information and voices being fed into me. So I think part of the key to this restorative time, I think especially for the entrepreneur who always feels like they have to be like tapped in, plugged in, is that it needs to be unplugged. I put out on Facebook, on my Facebook page, that we were going to be talking, and I asked people, what habits do you think contribute to happiness? And I didn't share with them what I was going to say, but not surprisingly, the majority of answers were about, I need my alone time. I need to be able to ignore the phone and the doorbell. Jay says, quiet time outdoors.
Yeah.
Is essential. And a number of people talked about being outdoors. And one other person named Kel talked about journaling and meditation. Those are the kinds of activities that allow you to kind of slow down everything and create space for yourself. So I think that's the absolute, it's number one, not just because it's the R in rest, but it's the most important.
Yeah, I agree. I have an issue with Facebook. I work solo, and so one of the challenges is that I do like my alone time, but I also need to be around people for at least a little part of the day, if not like half the day or something, where I feel like things are going on around me, so I'm not just in this quiet apartment and just kind of working away. And so that becomes, then I turn to Facebook as sort of my social outlet. But then, like you said, that can become like too much on its own. So if you're always going to Facebook and you have constant messages coming in from all these people and Twitter and everything else, then you didn't really get that downtime or the restorative time. So I think that's really important to emphasize.
Yes. And you actually bring up a great point about being alone in a group.
Yeah.
Sometimes that can be restorative as well. It can be energizing. Like I'll find that if I'm in my office by myself for too long, I need to like take my laptop over to a coffee shop and get some work done, because there's something about the people around me, the white noise, that sort of thing that actually helps me focus.
Yeah,
and energizes my work a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny. That's exactly how I am. Like I went Monday morning. I went down to this coffee shop here, and I was sitting at a table by myself, and there was a table next to me, and there was like maybe 6 or 8 people, and they were all discussing their businesses. I think they were all solo entrepreneurs, and I didn't need to be in their conversation. I wasn't even, like, I had too much work to do on my own, but just having that conversation right next to me was cool. It was like, I feel like I'm just, we're in the right environment here.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So number 2 is energy awareness. So noticing energetic patterns, honoring them, knowing when to say when.
Yes. Really, since being an introvert is at its core is about energy, it's really important to notice what gives you energy, what drains your energy. Like, getting together with a small group of friends can energize me, but getting together with 20 people could be draining. So understanding where that happens. And just like we just talked about, yes, I need a lot of alone time, but I can really start getting kind of unfocused and bogged down and drained if I have too much of it. So recognizing that, okay, I probably need to get out. I probably need to get around people. So noticing when you do your best work and how you do your best work. is also, really important. If you're a morning person, a night person, this is something we've heard since we have been working and studying and all of that. But I think for introverts, it's especially important to honor it, because what I have found as an entrepreneur is that my energy patterns don't always follow the 9 to 5, Monday through Friday pattern. So I have to kind of negotiate that and figure out a way to make it work for me so that I can be my most productive. And with the energy awareness, it's also about being proactive, about storing up energy before you need it, so that you don't hit a wall. And most of the time we can do that because we know there's a networking event coming up, or we know there's a client meeting. And so we can deliberately look at our schedule and say, okay, I'm not going to schedule anything else that morning. Or I'm going to make sure I don't have any calls after that particular meeting. So knowing how much you can handle in a day, in a week, in a month is really important.
Yeah, that's very true. And I just went to a conference last week or the week before last, and I think that you mentioned something in your book about going to conferences where you have to kind of decide when you're going to be social, when you're going to kind of network, and when to just kind of walk outside and take a walk and get out, because it was a really important thing where you're sitting in some lecture or something, and then there's a break, and then everybody wants to talk, and then you could just go back and forth like that all day, but by the end of the day you're just going to be completely exhausted as an introvert.
Yeah.
So that's it's really important to navigate that, I think, to be able to go, okay, this break I have to go off by myself. I'm not going to chat with people, and yes, I will miss out on some networking.
Exactly. Well, and that's one thing that came up at the World Domination Summit. They said, get over your FOMO. FOMO, your fear of missing out.
Yeah.
First and foremost, you're going to get the most out of this if you take care of yourself.
Right.
So, you might miss a cocktail hour or a networking opportunity or even a speaker. Like I missed 1 or 2 speakers that I heard later, oh, they were fabulous. And I just thought, and I was so saturated at that point, I knew that going to that was not going to necessarily do me much good.
Right.
So I thought, I'll catch the video later. So I think a lot of that, honoring your energy, is about getting over the fear of missing out.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. So number 3 is social selectivity, saying yes and no based on energetic and social needs, not out of guilt, obligation, or by default.
Yes. That one's all about boundaries. Having really clear boundaries about, and when I say social, it's not just, I guess you can extrapolate that and say just any interactions, whether it's with clients or customers or friends or family, to be really clear about where your boundaries are. Just like with the energy awareness, you have to know when to say when. You have to be able to know your capacity. And so part of that also is it shows up also in how we form friendships and relationships. Introverts tend to have a small, tight circle of friends.
Right.
I can name on one hand probably the number of people that I would just call and chat with and reveal all.
Yeah.
I don't need, 10 or more kind of thing. So I think, the social selectivity is also about choosing your friends wisely, because you invest a lot in them and you want them to invest a lot in you. So, choose them wisely so that they do energize you and don't drain you. I think we've all had relationships and friends that we love them to pieces, but they just exhaust us.
Yeah.
And so, you have to make a choice then and decide, do I want this person in my life? And if I do, to what extent?
Right.
And, sort of what place do they hold for me? And what do I get from them, and what do they get from me? And am I okay with all of that? So being just really intentional. And then when it comes to saying yes and no, just to make sure that it's motivated from a really positive place. In coaching, we talk about things being motivated either by love or fear.
Yeah.
And if we're not honoring our needs and we're not aware of it, then we can be really motivated by fear. And by that, we're saying yes because I feel guilt.
Yeah.
No because I say no, but I feel bad about it.
Right.
I feel stubborn or selfish. And that's a fear because we think, oh, I look selfish. I'm afraid of what they're going to think of me.
Yeah.
And then we can't feel good about saying no, even if that no was something that was good for us.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So, and I really appreciated, somebody on the Facebook page named Mary. She said one of the important things about social selectivity, she said, having standards in my business, like business hours, and sticking to them. If I walk all over my standards and reply to client emails at all hours of the night, I'm teaching my clients to walk all over my standards as well.
Oh yeah, that's a great point for business. Same thing. Yeah, I try to selectively just do email, at certain times and not be available all day for everybody, because that just gets completely draining.
Yeah.
I was thinking of that movie. It was Jim Carrey, the Yes. What was it?
Oh, Yes Man.
Yes Man. Yeah. I liked it because he basically was living this life where he was saying no to everybody and no to everything and not having any opportunities. And then he turns it around and does the exact opposite. And all these amazing things happen. And you see his worlds just opening up. But then there's a lot of like articles and books written for business on why it's so important to say no and why saying no is going to make you really successful and all that. So it's hard to kind of navigate that. I think there's a happy medium in between that works well for, based on who you are.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So number 4 is transparent communication. And
yes.
I'll let you take that one.
Well, this one can be the most challenging because introverts have really rich inner lives, right? We have conversations in our head and they can be so real that we don't realize we haven't shared the information. Yeah. I don't know how many times I've said to my husband, like, did I just think that or did I actually say blah, blah, blah? Right. Because it was so clear and loud in my head. So I think we can forget that people can't read our minds and that extroverts especially want to know what's going on. They want to have that transparency of communication. So I think number 1, extroverts can do themselves a favor by recognizing that an introvert taking time, being quiet, thinking about something is not a negative thing. It's just something they need space to do. And then introverts can help extroverts by vocalizing what their process is.
Right.
And saying, I need just a moment to think about this.
Yeah.
Or can I come back to you tomorrow? Or I really would like some alone time. It'll be good for me and it'll enable me to have more energy later when we go out. You almost feel like you have to over communicate or over explain. Like we feel like I really shouldn't have to say that I need to be alone and it doesn't mean that I hate you.
Yeah.
But, I think it's helpful just to be clear. And the important thing with that communication is that it's coming again from a place of love and not fear. So it's about self-care. It's about nurturing something that enables you to be there for others as well as yourself. And it's not defensive or apologetic. And that it's truthful. Like a classic example is you go to the party and you've kind of reached your limit, but we feel bad saying, okay, I'm ready to go. See you next time. And so we'll make up things.
Yeah.
And we'll say, I have a headache or I have to get up really early tomorrow or whatever. It's like, don't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
That just doesn't feel good, even if the person would never know. And I know they're just little white lies, but there's no reason to explain or defend why you're leaving something. If you've had a good time and it's been respectable, you just say, hey, it's been a great evening. I'm calling it a night. Thank you. I'll see you next time. So I think every time we make excuses, we're kind of reinforcing something that says it's not okay for us to take care of ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And it kind of related to this, and this could actually probably be a whole nother podcast in itself, but is your husband also an introvert or is he more of an extrovert?
No, he's an introvert. I'd say we're probably both about the same degree of introversion, and that presents its own advantages and disadvantages for sure.
Yeah, because I asked you that because I'm dating an introvert right now, and I feel exactly the same way. It's great, and then it's like there's challenges.
Well, there's an author who wrote The Introvert's Way. Her name is Sophia Dembling, and she's working on a book now, Introverts in Love. And so she's addressing the introvert angle of relationships, both introvert to introvert and extrovert to introvert. Oh. So stay tuned for that because I think it's going to give us some good insights.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. You could probably take each of the Myers-Briggs and do a book about each one.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm an INFJ. So introvert, intuitive, feeling, judging.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced while my husband hasn't taken it, he's an INFP.
Okay.
And so that last one, the P, perceiving, is all about go with the flow.
Yeah.
My J, judging, is all about structure.
Yeah.
So we don't necessarily run into trouble with the INF. It's the J and the P that can really trip us up.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I agree. We could, there's all sorts of things to explore in that.
Right. So you have some coaching programs. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, I do entrepreneur coaching and personal discovery coaching. So the entrepreneur coaching is geared towards folks who have been in business anywhere from, startup to 10 years. It runs the range. And so that's one-on-one coaching that I offer. And then the personal discovery is more about, basically what it says, more individual, looking at your life as a whole and removing barriers to your progress, towards whatever goals you want. So one is much more kind of business oriented, although it definitely touches on the personal because especially for solopreneurs, we are a business, whereas the personal tends to stay in that kind of realm. Yeah. So those are two kind of areas that I specialize in and have individual coaching programs around. And I'm developing a few other things that I'm not sure I'm ready to expound on at the moment, but I have a few other things that are in the works that I'm hoping are kind of do-it-yourself options. Nice. That will give especially business owners some tools that will help them, have some good insights into their business and set some really positive goals for themselves.
Cool. And all that's on your website, the introvertentrepreneur.com, right? Yep.
And I forgot to mention, there's a Rent Beth's Brain option as well. I call those insight strategy sessions. And that's more of a kind of a straight consulting, and it's designed if you have a very specific, obstacle or opportunity that you want to be exploring and processing through. And so those are more rent my brain for 2 hours and I'll tell you everything I know and help you as much as I can. So that's another alternative if somebody's not into the whole coaching thing.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. And you're on Facebook and Twitter.
Yes.
You want to give out your handles there?
Yeah. So Facebook, you just do / the introvert entrepreneur. And then on Twitter, it's introvert coach.
Okay. Cool. And I'll put that on the show notes so everybody can just go click on it and follow you and get some great tips on being an introvert entrepreneur.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. Well, Beth, it's been awesome chatting and having you on the show. I really like talking about business and having a fellow introvert on the show. So it's been a real pleasure. So thanks so much.
Thanks for reaching out. Thanks, Kevin.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Freedom Lovin' Podcast. If you like our show, please go into iTunes and give us a rating and review. Just search for the Freedom Lovin' Podcast and go ahead and put in your review and we will read it on the next show. Thanks again and have a great week.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Freedom Lovin' Podcast. To break free today, head on over to freedomlovin.com and download our free guide. 7 practical tips to living free in an unfree world.